Hello and welcome to a post-game live stream edition of the Cyclone Insider Podcast. I'm Travis Hines. He's Eli McKown coming to you after a 52-7 Iowa State victory over Arkansas State Saturday at Jack Trice Stadium. Pretty much, I think the game most people were expecting today in terms of the result of Iowa State, putting a pretty good beatdown on Arkansas State, who played Michigan tough last week to within 10. But really, from the get-go, had no shot against these Cyclones. They jump out to an early lead, never look back. Defense didn't give up a point until late when the starters were long rested. I think an encouraging game from Iowa State, just from a lot of different ways. I think they showed that they're good. They showed that they can get better. And they showed that they're perfectly capable of getting to November 7-0. In my opinion. I mean, I'm not guaranteeing it. I think they're perfectly capable, though, for a lot of different reasons that we can get into, Eli, here shortly. But first off, what was your impressions of Iowa State's performance today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything you can take away from this other than just to be kind of impressed. You did what you wanted to do, right? The game against Arkansas State, you want to come in, you want to dominate, you want to take care of business. And I thought for most of that game, that's exactly what they did. Offensively, the first drive, they stall out. But after that, it was kind of just smooth sailing from there. Ground game, well over 200 yards rushing. Rocco Becht doesn't have to get used a lot, but you saw him get to his targets, get to Jalen Noel, get to Jaden Higgins, get to his tight ends for, at times today, which was a good growth for the Cyclones in that regard. Defensively, just did everything you wanted. I mean, they have, the Red Bulls have a couple guys that were dangerous running the football at the quarterback position, but they didn't really let that get out of hand or allow the big play, so I thought that was huge. And outside of the one Rocco Becht's interception and then the weird, whatever we're calling the Connor Moberly interception, then the fumble, whatever we're calling that, they took care of the football pretty well. So overall, you just can't complain about that kind of an effort in this one.
Yeah, Becht's interception was not a good throw. Moberly's was a tip pass that hit his receiver in the hands. It's hard to fault the quarterback on that one. I want to talk a little bit about the running game because we talked so much the last few weeks and certainly over the bye week about how it's underwhelmed a little bit, which I think was probably overblown given how well the passing game has gone. It's hard to throw for 300 and run for 250 every week. There's only so many plays you can run in a game. But I thought that they showed some promise in a number of directions today. I mean, first off, let's talk about, when we talk about the running game, we're really talking about the offensive line to a large degree. Jalen Travis, Dalen Haysert play. Trevor Burr got the nod at left guard behind Barrett before Haysert did. So there's clearly still a lot of mixing and matching and probably patience required for that offensive line because I do think they're getting stronger. I think it'll be really interesting to see what kind of dynamic Travis brings, Haysert brings, and what kind of dynamic the continued competition along that line brings. Campbell talked about it on Tuesday that they felt like they're still, nobody, has their name bronzed on the depth chart right now for the offensive line. But then beyond that, Carson Hansen, 9 carries, 58 yards, couple of touchdowns. Jalen Jackson, 10 carries, 53 yards. Abu Sama, 7 carries, 30 yards. Everybody averaged over 4 yards a carry. They were productive. I think, you can look at this, and given when Iowa State's been at their best offensively, it's included a feature back, whether that be David Montgomery or Breece Hall. It doesn't look like we're going to see that, at least at this point in the year. Maybe that changes, but right now it looks like Carson Hansen, Jalen Jackson, and Abu Sama are going to split carries, and Campbell said it in the postgame that they all kind of do the same thing similarly. So this is not a case of here's our third down back, here's our guy for short yardage, here's our guy that we want to get outside. They kind of view them all similarly, and it has not been a case where one guy has taken the job and ran with it, which I think would be the preference, frankly. But if you're not going to get that, to have 3 guys that are productive is not a bad plan B. And I think that's what we saw today. And my guess is that's what we're going to see going forward, because if Iowa State felt like they had their guy, even if that person was not being productive, and let's just say Abu Sama in this case, because he was the guy that on the outside we thought might be the guy, they would be just shy of force feeding that guy. And instead we're seeing lots of substitutions. We're seeing lots of distribution and carries. And my guess is that's because Tyler Roll, the running backs coach, and Taylor Mauser, the offensive coordinator, are not seeing separation between those three. I think they're looking at them as interchangeable to a large degree right now.
And I think, you kind of saw in this game where the first drive, I believe, if I remember right, it was Jalen Jackson on the first one, then it was Hanson, then it was Abu or some order along that line. And you could tell when they came out in this one, it was very much like, let's see who has the hot hand. And I think for the most part, that was kind of Hanson to some extent. They still kind of rotated around just given the game script, and you don't want to maybe ride a guy in the sense of a game where it's like, do you want to give 25 carries to Hanson and wear him out, especially with given his injury issues from a year ago. But I think it was good for them to just have success, because in the last two games, like you said, I think game script changed that a little bit for them in terms of running the football. It wasn't necessarily that they're doing a bad job. It's just, second half of the Iowa game, you kind of had to start throwing the ball around a little bit. North Dakota, they were running the clock on you. But it was good to see success for them on that end for if you're an Iowa State fan, just to see that, growth of like, you have that option, because so far the passing game's been great. The offensive line's blocked well, but you didn't have that next option. And we kind of asked Matt Campbell about that after, just having all that go together. And he's like, makes it a heck of a lot easier to win games when you have all these things going, when you can set up the pass and make things more successful. And I think that's part of the reason you saw the tight ends get a lot more involved today a little bit as well, is just because you had that threat as well.
Yeah, and I think the way that they use Bramer, he had the big catch early, and then they had the fake sneak, throw it over the top to him, and that's where you saw his skill with being able to bring that in with one hand. I think they know what they have in him, and I think they've probably slow played it a little bit early this year. And then you see Tyler Moore go score a touchdown, where if you'll notice they were in 13. They got they had three tight ends on the field. Their best one not among them, and you've got Steve O'Klotz and Ben Burkle out blocking out in the open field for Tyler Moore to score that touchdown. Obviously they are going to utilize their tight ends. And again, I think it's a positive that it's very clear where this offense can go and what they can add dimensionally beyond Higgins and Knoll, who had good but not like huge days today. So I think, again, it's a very upside kind of day, I think, for Iowa State. And then conversely, you look at they're 3-0, playing good football, obviously have room to grow. And, man, you look at that schedule, and if they just do what they've been doing, which is play good to really good football, it's hard to not see them winning a lot of games coming up. I mean, let's just run down the schedule. Houston got absolutely smoked by Cincinnati today. I don't think anybody's worried about Iowa State going into Houston next weekend. Then you get Baylor at home. You get it seems to be a pretty middling West Virginia team. They beat Kansas today at home, so it's certainly not a gimme, but I would imagine Iowa State, I would think they're probably a favorite heading into that game. Then you got UCF at home, and then you're through October because they have a bye that last week in October. So you're looking at going into homecoming on November 2nd. Honestly, worst case scenario, 6-1. If you're worse than 6-1, you lost a game you really should not have lost, in my opinion. Whether, UCF maybe is better than I'm thinking, but 7-0, 6-1 seems like a reasonable baseline for what this team has shown so far and what we know about the Big 12.
And it's kind of one of those things. Being ahead of the season, we did a look ahead during the summer of kind of just what the schedule is shaping up to be. And it was like, look, if Iowa State gets that win against Iowa, it's going to show that they are proficient enough to beat a good Iowa team. And then from there, there's not a standout team until you get to those last two games. And even, Utah today, out Cam Rising right now, I think it's kind of seemingly like, who knows what his status is going to be come almost Thanksgiving time at that point. But that's going to be an issue for them. Kansas State's going to, they've looked great so far, but that game against Kansas State is looming large. So is Utah. But the next few games, I mean, it's hard not to look at that schedule and think if they keep putting games together that they may not be favored the rest of the way until they get to those last two games right now.
Yeah, and if you look at the trajectory they're on, it's doing what they're expected to do to win. They handle North Dakota, nothing special, but they handle it. They go into Kinnick, don't play great to start, but find a way to win, which is what you do against a ranked team on the road in a tough place to play. Then you get Arkansas State at home, and you beat the hell out of them. This is exactly what you're supposed to do. And if Iowa State does what it's supposed to do, not play over its head or beyond its means. If it does what it's supposed to do, you're looking at, being right in the thick of things, if not at the top of things in that Big 12 race heading into November. And like, even in November, let me pull this back up. You get Texas Tech homecoming, Kansas looks in rough shape, in Arrowhead.
Jalen Daniels doesn't look like the same player right now. Just hasn't since he's had that injury. It just hasn't looked the same.
No, and then Cincinnati at home, and then you have those 2 monster games to finish out the year. I mean, this doesn't get and like, who knows? I mean, everything changes. It's college football week to week. We're here this 3rd Saturday in September. There's a decent chance we look stupid in a few weeks, but you look ahead, and man, it's not hard to see the path.
Certainly, and especially, when you start talking about what our new era of college football is looking like with, I don't even want to necessarily say the words out loud, but it's the 12-team college football playoff. You do have a little bit of leeway as well in this era. So what that looks like for them is going to be interesting, but it's going to take a lot of taking care of business for Iowa State down the stretch. I think today Rocco Beck did what he needed to do, but the passes weren't, he wasn't always on point today. And if a lot of those passes against, a well-coached Baylor, Dave Aranda defense, some of those kind of teams, Utah and Kansas State are going to let a lot of those go. And things can go south in a hurry if you're a little loose with the football and not getting to your wide receivers where you want them to. So that's going to be something to watch as well. But still got it done. I mean, 52-7, you can't complain. We're nitpicking here, really. But
Iowa State 52, Arkansas State 7. Cyclones begin Big 12 play next week against Houston. Be sure to check out DesMoinesRegister.com this evening and tomorrow morning for all our coverage of the Cyclones. Big win. I will be in Houston next weekend. Eli, thanks for joining me. I'm going to log off before I continue to cough. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.